If I can deal with the first item on the agenda, election of chairman, can I have a nomination, please?
I'd like to nominate Dr. Hill.
Thank you. Any seconders? Is that agreed?
Agreed.
Yeah.
Thank you, everyone, and welcome everybody to today's meeting of the Member Conduct Panel. This meeting is being broadcast live to the public, and for those not able to watch live, the webcast has been recorded and will be made available for viewing on the County Council's website after the meeting. Before we begin doing introductions, I'll deal with a couple of formalities. Do we have members? Any members wish to declare an interest? Good. So before we begin, we'll go around the table and ask everybody to introduce themselves. Starting on my left. Hang on, my left. Sorry.
I'm Bill Piper. I'm the County Councillor for Bolton Astley.
Andrew Innes. I'm the County Councillor for Melton East.
Sarah Hill, County Councillor, Market Harbour East.
I'm David Page, Market Harbour West and Foxton.
Phil King. I'm the County Councillor for the Gardry Division.
Pamela Roberts. I'm the independent person.
Fiona McMillan, Monitoring Officer.
Joanne Toomey, Democratic Services Manager.
Charles Witt for Markfield, Thornton and Desford.
Hi, my name is Alex Oram and I'm the here to present the investigation report.
Thank you, everybody. So the first issue we need to agree on or decide is to whether to continue this matter in public or move into private session. Fiona, do you wish to give us some advice on this matter?
Yes, thank you, Chair. So this hearing has been convened as a public hearing, which is usual for hearings of this nature. It's my recommendation that the panel should therefore proceed in public unless it needs to resolve at any stage to exclude the press and public for any part of the proceedings where it is likely that exempt or confidential information will be disclosed. So for the purposes of the publication of the agenda, I have treated the unredacted investigation report as not for publication because it contains personal information relating to individuals, which is exempt information within Schedule 12A, Paragraph 1 and Paragraph 2 of the Local Government Act 1972. However, a redacted public version of the investigation report has been prepared for today, and I would invite the panel to apply the public interest test and determine that the hearing should proceed in public and that a redacted public version of the investigation report should now be published and considered in public with only minimal personal information redacted on the basis that it is exempt. In practical terms, that means I've reviewed the report and removed the complainants' names and identifying details. That information has no bearing on the matters you're being asked to determine, and its removal is to protect the individuals concerned from unnecessary public or media attention. The published version, therefore, refers to them consistently as Complainant A, Complainant B, Complainant C, and Complainant D. I would ask the panel and everyone participating today to ensure that during the hearing the complainants are not named and that references are made only to A, B, C, and D as set out in the redacted report, if that is what you decide. If during the course of the hearing it becomes necessary to refer to any residual exempt personal information, the panel can consider whether to pass a resolution to exclude the press and public for that limited part of the proceedings only. So in those circumstances, I invite the panel to now resolve formally that the hearing should proceed in public and that the investigation report should be issued as the full report with limited redactions for publication and consideration in public session, with the unredacted report retained as exempt.
I agree with those. Yes.
Okay. In that case, we will continue in public. So as we've agreed to remain in public, a public version of the investigation report will now be published on the Council's website. All those present will receive a copy of this version. It has minor redactions to remove personal information only.
You just wait for 2 minutes for Joe to upload that onto the website then. Thank you.
Do I not get a say in that one at all?
Mr. Whitford, do you want to address the chair? Please do now.
I'd ask that the full unredacted investigation report be made public. And if that's not to be, then you need to redact the name of my witnesses and people of interest that are still stated in the redacted report. Bear with me, I'm a little bit slow today because of what's going on with my health. Mm-hmm. How can it be fair to redact on one side the witnesses, but not to redact the names of my witnesses and people of interest within the report? So it's got to be one or the other for me. It's either got to be in private so that the unredacted can be used, or, and I must add that my own report has got the full names of everybody in it, and I will use it. Because there's a lot of things happened that you don't know about since, where I've physically been attacked by one of the complainants, and it is an ongoing police matter. And that person is named in my report, and as I say, I will use it. So if you stay public, I will use the names. Thank you.
Mr. Whitford, do you want to tell the panel which names exactly that you think should be redacted from the proposed public version of the report?
Are we public at this very moment?
Yes.
So if I say the names,
Well, if you,
they're
if
out
you
there in
tell
the
us-
public. So no, I will not.
Can you say where they are in the report, and we can look at that in front of us at the moment?
My witnesses that were never used when I gave names and addresses of people that were to give evidence at the investigation. There's 2 names from Markfield that are now in police protection because of this investigation. It's a lot worse than what you lot think it is, and it's gone a lot further. But there's also a name of a person who's supposed to have made a fake Facebook. That name's still in there, and that's a real person who's got a business in Leicester, and he runs a nightclub and a coffee bar. And if his name comes out involved in this, well, big problem. So it's the knock-on effect of what this investigation has produced is affecting everything.
I think we should adjourn for a few minutes and have a discussion.
Yeah.
We're
with our
in
advisors
private,
and
in
see
private,
where we want to
yeah.
take it. So sorry everybody, but we need to have a
We'll
chat.
Have a discussion then.
Me too.
Yes, please.
Okay.
Push the panel. And web capacity is splendid for that. Thank you.
Thank you.
So thank you everybody for coming back in and everybody who's watching online. So we've had a discussion amongst ourselves and with the investigator and Mr. Whitford, and we have agreed to distribute the investigation report as is with the very particular left in. So all those present will now receive a copy of this version of the investigation report. It's had minor redactions to remove personal information only. So we'll get those given out. Moving on, the process for the hearing we will follow is set out in Appendix A attached to the agenda. First, we'll hear first from Fiona Lewin, the monitoring officer, who will outline the purpose of the hearing as detailed in her summary report. Then we'll call on Mr. Oram to carry out the investigation to present his report, at the end of which the panel can ask him questions. We'll next hear from Mr. Whitford, and the panel will also ask him questions. I'm not aware of any witnesses being called today. So then we will hear from Mrs. Roberts, the independent person, to give her views. At the end, it is expected the panel will adjourn to consider it and make its decision. Thank you. And we would ask that everyone remain close by during this time so the panel can reconvene as needed to announce its decision. So, any questions about the process? Thank you. So, moving on to the report, the monitoring officer, item 3, the investigation with respect to the alleged breach of the Members' Code of Conduct by Mr. Whitford, which is at pages 3 to 14 of the agenda pack.
Thank you. So my role today is to set out the purpose of the hearing today and to outline the process followed to bring this matter before you today. So the purpose of the hearing is for the Member Conduct Panel to consider the investigation into the alleged breach of the Members' Code of Conduct by Mr. Whitford, by hearing a summary of the investigator's report, followed by any response and evidence from the subject member, Mr. Whitford. The panel should then hear the views of the council's appointed independent person and then proceed to determine on the facts whether the code has been breached. If the panel concludes that there has been no breach, the matter is resolved and no further action is taken. If the panel concludes that there has been a breach, the panel will then determine what, if any, sanction or other action is appropriate in accordance with the council's procedures, and it will announce its decision in public at the conclusion of its deliberations. In terms of the process that has been followed so far, between the 20th of September and the 4th of October 2025, complaints were received from 4 members of the public regarding the conduct of Mr. Whitford. The complaints arose primarily from email correspondence between Mr. Whitford and local residents who contacted him about the unauthorised hanging of St George's flags on lampposts in Markfield. Following receipt of those complaints, the former monitoring officer, Lauren Haslam, undertook an initial assessment in accordance with the council's procedures for dealing with allegations of a breach of the Code of Conduct. And at its meeting of the 17th of November 2025, the Member Conduct Panel determined that the complaints should be referred for investigation. On the 25th of November, I appointed external investigators, Alex Oram and Mark Hedges of CH&I Associates, to conduct that investigation. Their final report was received on the 26th of February 2026. Following receipt of that report, on the 27th of February, I wrote to Mr. Whitford, enclosing a copy of the report and inviting his response on the matters required by the procedure, whether findings were agreed or disputed, whether facts were disputed, what evidence he wished to rely on, whether any part of the report or hearing should be treated as exempt, and whether he intended to call any witnesses. In response, Mr. Whitford confirmed that he accepted the findings relating to the email correspondence. No further representations have been received from him on the remaining matters addressed in the investigation report. He also indicated that he wished to attend and was willing to give evidence orally and respond to questions. I've also sought and recorded the view of the independent person, Pamela Roberts, in accordance with the procedures, and she is attending today to advise the panel of her views. As to witnesses, the position set out is that Mr. Whitford does not wish to call witnesses, and the investigators do also not wish to call any witnesses. So, Chair and members, that's it for me on the process. Unless there are any questions for me, I will now hand over to the investigating officer, Alex Oram, to summarise the findings and conclusions of their investigation.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you all for inviting me along today. The last time I was here, there was a big Premiership trophy in the lobby, so I express my commiserations for whatever's elapsed since. As a Norwich fan, I share your pain. But obviously, we're here today to present the findings of our independent investigation into the conduct of County Councillor Charles Whitford, following the 4 complaints that were referred to by the monitoring officer. The investigation primarily focused on whether Mr. Whitford failed to comply with the County Council's Member Code of Conduct when emailing the residents involved. We also, though, considered an allegation that he failed to properly register a business interest in his members' register, and also a concern expressed by one of the complainants that Mr. Whitford was taking action subsequent to the complaint that might be classed as bullying or intimidatory. When presenting our findings, I make the assumption that you've all had the opportunity to read through the investigation report. I therefore do not intend to go through its details forensically. I'm happy to take any questions at the end, and I'll do my best to address them. The core of the matter obviously then stems from events that occurred on September the 21st, when 2 identified men erected St George's flags on lampposts in the village of Markfield. 4 residents, who are referred to as complainants A, B, C and D, contacted Mr. Whitford in his capacity as the then Cabinet Member for Highways, Transport and Waste to express their concerns and ask what the council intended on doing about it. They reported that the men hanging the flags were acting without authorisation and had allegedly used aggressive, racially and homophobically charged language towards them and other members of the public when challenged. We set out the details of our investigation in the report in terms of who we spoke to, what information we gathered, and then we set out that evidence in section 4. I'm going to focus my presentation on whether the evidence in that section amounts to a failure to comply with the Council's Code of Conduct. Before I do, though, I will briefly touch on the other two areas of concern raised. The alleged failure to include his position as a company director in his register, and that during the course of the investigation, fake Facebook accounts under the names of Mark Ford and the Leicestershire Times were used to comment on these complaints, and on one occasion to threaten to expose the identity of one of the complainants. The information published by Companies House makes it clear that Mr. Whitford was technically a director of App Chats Limited until the company was dissolved on the 23rd of September 2025. As such, Mr. Whitford was legally required to include that directorship in his members' register until that time. He didn't do so, and so technically that might be considered to be a breach of the code. Indeed, we think the panel had little choice but to find as such during this hearing. But during the course of the investigation, Mr. Whitford was able to demonstrate that Companies House had written to him and left him with the reasonable belief that this company would be dissolved by April 2025, which preceded the requirement for him to complete that register. Furthermore, no parties have suggested that his failure to include his position in this company in his register has improperly advantaged him or disadvantaged anyone else. Therefore, our recommendation was that no further action is taken in relation to that aspect of the complaint. In terms of the Facebook accounts, one of the complainants told us that he believed that these two accounts had been used to threaten to expose his identity. We were satisfied, having reviewed them, that they were likely fake accounts, but we took the decision that after comments on the draft report, that it wouldn't be in the public interest to pursue this investigation any further, on the basis that we felt there was already evidence in the email form that had been accepted by Mr. Whitford that he had already made that threat to the complainant. And given the light touch regulatory scheme in which we work and the limited amount of sanctions, we took a proportional decision not to investigate that aspect any further. So then moving on to our analysis primarily of the emails, we've looked firstly at whether Mr. Whitford's conduct falls within the jurisdiction of the Localism Act. Was he acting as a councillor at the relevant times? We considered that Mr. Whitford was clearly acting in his capacity as both a councillor and a cabinet member when he used his county council email address to respond to the emails from the four complainants. His auto signature on each included his position as a county councillor, his position as the cabinet member for highways and transport, and indeed all complainants told us that it was in that capacity that they emailed him in the first instance. Furthermore, the matter under discussion, the unauthorised hanging of flags on county council street furniture, was a matter of council business and one that related to this kind of activity. We therefore were satisfied that the code was engaged and his conduct can be considered against it. We went on to set out what we hope is helpful guidance in relation to how each relevant paragraph of the code has been considered by us, weighing heavily on the LGA guidance that was issued the year before last. And then we weighed Mr. Whitford's conduct against that. When doing so, we've stressed that we are not making any considerations in relation to the way in which the council decided to respond to the concerns about the flag hanging. Our considerations are solely focused on whether Mr. Whitford, as the relevant cabinet member, communicated the council's position appropriately when responding to them and their inquiries. In Mr. Whitford's emailed response to the first complainant, he did not address the alleged harassment she had described. Instead, he questioned her character, asking, "Are you anti-British?" and labelled those who objected to the flags, as the complainant clearly did, as far-left extremists. In his response to complainant 2, Mr. Whitford not only expressed his personal disappointment in her, he said he was ashamed of her. Despite recognising the legitimacy of her concerns about the possible illegality of the actions carried out by those who hung the flags, Mr. Whitford suggested that she was anti-British for raising them with her. Turning to the allegations made in complaint 3, Mr. Whitford told him that he was lucky not to get hurt given his anti-British behaviour in confronting the people hanging the flags. we found his response generally dismissive and personally insulting. Again, with complainant 4, he suggested she was anti-British, that she re-evaluate her own political agenda, and complained without any basis that we have seen that 98% of British people approved of the flags. Mr. Whitford further warned her that confronting men who were actually acting illegally was dangerous, while simultaneously defending the presence of the flags and their actions, and reminding her that she didn't own the lampposts. Members must treat others with respect. This does not mean that they cannot disagree or be critical with others. They must, however, avoid personal attacks, offensive language, or demeaning language. While Mr. Whitford is entitled to express his patriotic views robustly, the personalisation of his responses, such as labelling a long-term resident as anti-British for raising legitimate concerns, crossed the line, we felt, between political debate and personal attack. Furthermore, responses such as "I am ashamed of you" and "very disappointed in you" are clear examples of demeaning language directed at a member of the public's character. Rather than providing a civil explanation of the County Council's position regarding the flags, he used his official platform to attempt to shame those expressing concerns. By his own admission, Mr. Whitford later conceded these aspects of these emails were disrespectful and too hard. In our view, the personal insults and dismissive rhetoric he used meant that he did treat others with respect. He did not. Sorry, failed to treat others with respect. Apologies. Turning then to his requirement not to bully others. In our view, in particular in relation to complainant 3, we did view it as a use of his power as a cabinet member to intimidate and humiliate members of the public. Furthermore, he took the decision to contact the third complainant after the complaint had been submitted to state that he believed that the complainant was the one causing the division, and warned that he might need to disclose the complainant's identity to those who shared his own concerns about the complainant's actions. The guidance from the Local Government Association states, once there is a possibility of a complaint that the code of conduct has been broken, councillors need to be alert to how their behaviour towards potential witnesses or officers involved in handling their case might be viewed. Members of the public should not be fearful that they will be subject to revengeful action when they make a complaint about a councillor to an appropriate body, as this complainant did. In our view, this was another example of bullying behaviour in relation to this matter. His response to this complainant wasn't the only reason we separated it from the other 3. In his initial response to this complainant, we believe that Mr. Whitford used his county council email to disseminate anti-Muslim conspiracy theories, referencing an influx of soon-to-be millions of mainly Muslim men of fighting age coming here to make this country a Muslim state, as proved by the attempt to bring in Sharia law in London last week, and implying that those opposing the flag are encouraging Britain to become an Islamic state, was an improper use of his position and his email. One of the complainants highlighted a post that Mr. Whitford had shared on Facebook at this time, which was a large banner stating, "It's time to end the Islamic colonisation of the UK," a post that was subsequently deleted. We've carefully considered both these aspects in our report, and whilst we accept that on social media accounts in particular, councillors' right to free speech allows them to have more leeway when they're making political comments, expressing their political views, even when they're controversial and even when they offend, the courts have historically afforded such political expression substantial protection, as long as it doesn't incite violence. But whilst the law allows a councillor significant latitude to express personal opinions on social media, the council's statutory obligations require strict separation between private views and the impartial administration of public services. Therefore, to include such comments in response to members of the public as a cabinet member, we felt that he did fail to comply with the equality aspects of the code. Mr. Whitford had a central role in ensuring that equality and neutrality are embedded in the authority's decision-making and performance. Furthermore, the principle of leadership dictates that a councillor's duty extends beyond merely representing and repeating information. They're expected to rigorously verify the accuracy and evidentiary basis of their assertions. Disseminating inflammatory tropes regarding Sharia law and Islamic colonisation with an official response to a constituent, we felt was a failure to uphold these standards. Such conduct performed in his capacity as a relevant cabinet member constituted a fundamental failure to foster good community relations and undermined public confidence in the county council's commitment to promoting equality and avoiding unlawful discrimination. We therefore did recommend that he fail to comply with that aspect of the code. So in summary, we consider that Mr. Whitford's email responses to the various complainants represented an egregious breach of the code. Evidencing they did his failure to treat others with respect, his bullying of others, his failure to promote equalities, is putting the county council at risk of breaching the Equality Act 2010. And we think in the round, this also brought his role and the council into disrepute. While we recognise that Mr. Whitford has subsequently offered an apology for his conduct, he has also continued to an extent to defend his actions. We consider that his position as a cabinet member when he's made these comments could be seen as an aggravating factor. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Laura. Questions from the panel?
If I may, I'd like to come back to your point that you're making about acting as a cabinet member, and the points you've made about equality neutrality being compromised here. Are you saying then that no cabinet member of any authority is allowed to make any political statement in their correspondence with constituents?
I think councillors have to be very careful. They're obviously not allowed to use council resources for political purposes. That's entrenched within the ideas of the code. So whenever they're acting in that capacity as a cabinet member and disseminating information, they have to be very cautious about straying into political rhetoric. And so every single case would have to be judged on the individual sort of facts of it. But as a rule, obviously when they're campaigning, when they're on social media, that's when they can know the politics. But when they're acting as a representative of the council and utilising council resources, and then they have to be very cautious about how they do that.
Can I just ask a question then? Does that, in your view, legally comply? The reason why I ask is because, and I'm not defending the view particularly, but I'm defending the right freedom of speech. And the thing that concerns me a little bit is we're shutting down potentially the opportunity for people to express a certain view. And one thing that happened in the May 25 elections is that a whole group of people with different views that were not prevalent in the previous life of this council were elected, and some of those views are perfectly entitled to those views, and whether this actually has transcended that, I don't know. I just think that it's a different expression of a particular political view. And you're saying effectively that that's not acceptable as a cabinet member. Is it acceptable as a councillor to say those things in a letter to a constituent?
No.
No, not either.
No.
Okay. Just clarify.
It's an aggravating factor, is what we're saying, because you're in an elevated position of responsibility as a cabinet member. So it's more to do with the obligations under the code in terms of leadership. And if you're in a cabinet position, then I suppose that sort of ups the ante a little bit more.
Can I just ask you then, in which case, are there any guidelines for cabinet members?
Specifically, no.
Okay, and therefore, so the comments around cabinet, are they relevant in which case? Because you're making an assumption that there's a higher threshold, but where does that sit? Where does that?
The administration are the leadership team essentially of the councillors in terms of the council, and the code of conduct has specific. It's based on the Nolan principles, and one of those principles is leadership. Yeah, and it talks about leading the whole council and representing all your constituents, not just the ones that have supported you politically. So that's the key thing in terms of why that might be an aggravating factor. And obviously in this case, because Mr. Whitford was the relevant cabinet member for this issue, that's why I think it's been raised in terms of the fact that he's been a cabinet member.
If I can just, I absolutely see where you're coming from, and I understand it.
Yeah.
I think had the council collectively sat down and made a decision that they were going to not remove these flags from their street furniture because they felt that it would stop an influx of millions, mainly Muslim men of fighting age, coming into the country and introducing Sharia law. Had the council given that as their rationale for not removing the flags, then Mr. Whitford would have been quite within his rights to express that view in a formal response to a complainant coming to the cabinet member and saying, what are the council going to do about these flags? I haven't seen that as being the rationale that this council took for not removing the flags from lampposts. Mr. Whitford should have given them what the council were going to do or not do and why, and instead he chose to reply with language that you could describe as political, absolutely. But within a formal response as a cabinet member, we felt that was highly inappropriate.
Yeah, I suspect I'm going on a similar sort of area. I mean, just hypothetically, basically, when you're a councillor, just kind of being general here, all manner of residents come to you and ask you your views about things. Sometimes it's with operational things. They say, I've got a problem with a pothole, for example. Who do I approach? And you signpost to them the correct service, and you send their thing in and say, this is where it. So sometimes you get emails from residents saying, I'm not very happy about whatever issue it is, and they want to engage in a discussion with you about a political issue, and there are many, okay, across a wide spectrum. Now, I've always adopted the view personally that I generally don't get involved in a discussion about political issues because you end up, the person's never going to agree with you, and you can spend an awful lot of time doing that. And there are forums for having political discussions aside from an email account, and quite often it's normally speaking to put someone one-to-one and having that conversation offline, if I can put it like that. So I'm just trying to understand what you've just said, because obviously some of the content of the email, certainly a lot of it is, I would classify as political view. Some of it not particularly well written, but and that might be part of the problem. But some of it is political view. I'm not saying I agree with it. I don't. But there are parts of it which I think, I certainly. So are we saying that under the Code of Conduct, you're not allowed, as any councillor, to express a political view to a resident about what your politics are? Or is this just applicable to Mr. Whitford because he was the cabinet member?
I mean, again, and it is a minefield, and it's complicated, and you wear different hats at different times.
Yeah.
When you're in, a political debate and with members of the public who are asking specifically about your individual politics, and that's the understood environment within which you're in, then that would be taking into account when compared to a formal response to an inquiry to a cabinet member about a council position or service. And they're the sorts of, but what I would say, and I know it's maybe again focusing to this, in either position, you shouldn't be using language like "I'm ashamed of you" and "I'm disappointed in you," or "you're anti-British," or
I didn't say I agree.
No.
I'm just trying to understand.
But I think absolutely that that's the lifeblood of local councils, is being able to debate political issues. And they talk about the cut and thrust of local democracy, and people get passionate about these things, and the code isn't there to stop any of that happening. But it's about thinking in each and every circumstance, who am I communicating with? Why have they contacted me? Who am I representing here? Is it clear that I'm talking about my personal position? You know, are you saying, right, this is the council's position, but while I'm engaging with you, can I just tell you my personal position on this? And just making sure that there's clarity in your communication, and that whilst you can say things that are going to offend people, you're not allowed to be personally rude, insulting, abusive, or offensive.
No, I understand that.
Yeah. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Alex.
More questions?
Yeah, I just want clarity on this, how a message is coming across, because you use the word, you know, you're saying that certain words that are used you feel are inappropriate. I'm just wondering how we decide what's appropriate, what's inappropriate. Some people can express themselves in different ways. In fact, everybody expresses themselves in different ways. What's the benchmark that says?
With respect, which is the most normal consideration, generally it's playing the ball, not the man, for another sporting metaphor. But discussing the issues and disagreeing with someone's stated position on something is the one that the Standards Board used to give, which is very basic, but saying you're talking drivel was tended to be allowable. But saying you're an idiot isn't, because one is referencing what you think about their politics or the position that they're stating. One is actually talking about their personal character or their characteristics. And it's why the term liar has always been so sort of seen as unparliamentary language, because you're moving away from saying that's untrue, what you've just said is false, to saying you're questioning their integrity, their personal integrity. And that's normally where the barrier is. So saying things, if we move back to the report, like you're anti-British or you're a left-wing extremist, if you simply say that you didn't like either the flag hanging or they're where we feel that's straying into personal comment.
So it's a bit like the guys were asking about free speech. It's having that understanding of where you're responding to somebody in your position as a councillor, and you're challenging their, and I think this is probably the guideline, you're challenging their belief rather than their character. I think that's right. What you're.
But also, I would stress there's a time and a place for that and for not doing that. You know, when you're electioneering, when you're trying to win votes, when you're even now going on social media, because let's face it, it's a constant, even if you're outside of an election period. Then that is where politics tends to come into play. But you're also elected to represent all of the residents of your ward, regardless of whether they agree with your politics or they don't agree with you. So if you're particularly helping a resident on a matter in relation to a council service and you're giving them assistance, then in a sense that's where politics sits to one side, and you're there as their representative to either answer their questions or assist them in their inquiries or what they're trying to achieve. And it's those two scenarios where I think councillors can think about, in this relationship, what is and isn't appropriate.
Thank you.
Yeah, can I just come back to you on to use the term "I'm ashamed of you"? If that had been used, if that sentiment had been expressed differently, would that still be unacceptable? If Councillor Whitford had said your view is shameful, is that the same outcome?
I mean,
it's different, isn't it?
It's difficult, yeah. And if that was the only comment within a relatively benign email, then it's possible that wouldn't have met the bar. It's kind of you know, I guess it's hard to isolate certain things when we've got the emails in the entirety. But
yeah,
but yes, I mean, it's as an isolated comment, something like that may not be considered. And in a sense, you're here to decide what that is, because disrespect is quite a nebulous term. Though treating others with respect is a fairly nebulous term. I know people who feel that they've been disrespected if someone hasn't offered them a handshake when they've walked into a room, or they're not wearing a tie. You know, they might say, I've arrived here and disrespected the panel by not wearing. So it's a very personal, and the idea behind the Localism Act, and there is more national guidance. The idea about the notional was these are the Nolan principles on which we want to espouse and want councillors to act. But when it comes to the minutiae, it's the people making the decisions at a local level that decide what that looks like. So is this the sort of language we're happy for our cabinet members to use? Is this the culture that we want within this council? So to an extent, it's in your hands when you start getting to those sort of 50-50, you know, I don't know, the more difficult, nuanced discussions over words and everything, that's exactly where your deliberations are so important, and you set the tone for the entire council.
Also taking things in the round. Councillor King.
Yeah, thanks, Chair. So if I can just, Alex, thanks very much. We were talking earlier about exchanging political views, and certainly the first very lengthy email from complainant, I think it's Steve, isn't it?
Yes.
Is very long, and it's also, I would regard as quite political in its overtone.
I agree.
So I'm just trying to think, you know, you just earlier just said, well, responding politically to emails. So I'm just thinking here. So I'm just wondering, you know, the complainant, certainly at least one of them, has made a very political charged email to Mr. Whitford. So yes, I suppose he could have just said, okay, I'll forward your complaint on to Department X. That would be the very, you know, banal sort of answer that someone could have done. But then he's gone back to them with some, you know, some commentary, etc. So, you know, I suppose I'm just kind of playing this out in my head a bit, really. Political response, you know, if you get a political email in from someone, you either do say nothing, do nothing, literally just send it, or you go back. The temptation is always to go back and respond to the political points that have been made to you, because we're elected as local politicians, and that's one of the elements of being a politician. Is someone says something to you, I don't like this, or I think you should be doing whatever it is, there's always a temptation to go, and not, and rightly so, you want to say, oh, hang on, I don't agree with that, I think, you know, you're wrong, and actually you should be doing, you know, we should be doing whatever it is. But in this instance, I mean, I'm just trying to understand that, you know, in the instance of this, what you're saying is that Mr. Whitford shouldn't have done any of that. He shouldn't have gone back and made any political points at all.
No.
He should have just kept it plain vanilla. Thanks for your email. Points are noted. I forward, you know, or because I'm trying to understand, you know, how much, because again, it comes back to this freedom of expression, freedom of speech issue. Or if he was going to do that, how should he have best responded?
I think there are two elements there. I think in the first instance, we talked about use of council resources, and your cabinet member position is a council resource. So if you're acting in that regard, you've got to be careful about the political element. But if we take your point about a constituent just contacting you as a councillor, or contacting you on social media, okay, and this is where I really feel for councillors, because social media can be a fantastic way of communicating with constituents.
Yeah.
But I always end up in these hearings because a councillor has said something on social media that they possibly shouldn't, okay, and I will see surrounding that the abuse that councillors are getting on social media and the lack of protection that councillors are getting from members of the public on social media. And that's an area of concern that certainly in my role I can't comment, because members of the public don't have a code of conduct to sign up to. So I do have a lot of sympathy there. What I do have to say consistently is that as elected councillors, you're meant to set the highest standards and be an exemplar for members of the public. And that's particularly true in your public communications, because if you allow your behaviour to descend to the levels that maybe sometimes you're facing from members of the public, then that sort of sullies the entire debate, and it encourages that sort of poor behaviour moving forward. So we would absolutely stress to councillors to try and not allow the way that they communicate, even if they're antagonised, to fall below a certain standard. In terms of expressing a disagreement or political position, again, I think if Mr. Whitford had limited his comments to saying, I understand your concerns, I disagree with them, I love, there are elements of his responses that we've not referred to in our considerations, when he talks about the British flag bringing a tear to his eye and how much he loves seeing them flying around the place. If he'd had limited his response to that, then I'm not sure we'd be here. It's when you then go on the attack that there is concern, and I'd say that is the sort of that's where, certainly for me, lines are crossed. Absolutely, say what your own position is and whether you disagree with them, but we felt that the nature of the responses went beyond that in this particular occasion.
Okay, thank you very much. Very comprehensive report. That was very well written.
Thank you.
Mr. Whitford,
Yeah.
Respond to the report. Specifically the report.
A couple of things I'd like to state before I go into my actual full response, and that is that I do accept, through my inexperience, I was a new councillor, that I did respond to the emails incorrectly, and they were my personal opinions and not my professional response. So I do accept that fully without questioning anything there. I should not have responded how I did, and I have already apologised to the people those 4 complainants. I have made an apology. It was accepted by 1 and the other 3 it wasn't, but I've also twice made an apology, once on the BBC and once on another. Anyway, that doesn't matter. I have apologised 3 times already, and I have done some training on how to be more professional in my email responses. Hence the fact there's been no complaints since these ones. And I do obviously still carry on talking to a lot of people and emailing all the time, but definitely of a professional level now. So I do accept that. That's before I criticise anything. The other one, freedom of speech, I would just like to say that, it is very important to me. I am a member of the Freedom of Speech Council, and it says everyone has the right of freedom of speech or an expression, opinions, and how you impart information should be allowed without interference. So that's not, as I said, I'm not saying that just the information that's in the emails, some of it, most of it, I still believe is true. So most of my response was based on what I believe to be true. One of those things that's been already stated about millions coming in by boat. Well, we're at 1.2 million. So my comment was actually truthful. And I'd now like to go on to what I call a flawed investigation. Sorry, I get tongue-tied at the minute because of my medication. An investigation should take all information, gather it, consider it, and make a decision, following evidence leading to the truth. First mistake was when Lauren Haslam sends the wrong information to the investigation team. She sent the whole package of all the complaints, even those early ones had already been thrown out. Following them were dealt with, by this panel. Where complainant A, B and C was already dealt with, and the Companies House was supposed to fall away, and I have proof of that if I provided the letter stating when the company was disbanded. And this letter is the official letter from Companies House, and it was in April before the election. So that shouldn't have even gone to the investigation. It should have fell away, her words. But she supplied A to F complaints to the investigation, which she then corrected later on. At the conclusion of the investigation, I asked the investigator, it wasn't this gentleman, it was his colleague, how they managed to form a conclusion that was so far away from the truth. He told me that they used a system called probability. The gentleman told me earlier they didn't actually use this, but the other Mark told me they did. And in its basic form, probability, I don't know how many people remember it at school. You're given a coin, you flip the coin, and it basically comes out at a 50-50. 50 heads, 50 tails, which means it can be 50% wrong. And of course, if the information is weighted, as in the coin gets a little bit of blue tack put on one side, the result obviously comes out at a 75-25 percentage. That's 75% wrong. This happens in the investigation, where he took all the statements from and spoke to the complainants, but he did not, or they did not, sorry, speak to my witnesses, and the names and addresses were provided. So the coin was weighted, and if you use probability, you got a good chance of being 75% wrong. And information ignored by the investigation. This is quite important. Here I've obviously excluded the names of the people, but in one of the interviews, the complainant explained that they had formed a group in Markfield to deal with the flags. That was before any emails had been sent or received. So they formed a group that consisted of all the complainants. The investigator totally missed this and ignored it, even though I had made it clear the group had planned this attack on me. The investigator did not contact my witnesses. I refrained from saying their names, but two people from Markfield. I had planned to have them here today, but both are under police protection, as I am due, sorry, as am I. This group in Markfield has come under scrutiny by the police. Both of these witnesses that I've provided are very important people that have been magistrates, lawyers, and counsellors. So they would have had quite an influence on the investigator and the weighting of the probability. So in summary, information given to investigators was incorrect. Investigators did not talk to the witnesses. The use of the system of probability, that at its best is only 50% accurate. Missed or ignored information that would show the group in Markfield deliberately formed a group to attack me. And hence the reason how I replied to the emails was heated, because I'd already been attacked at parish council. Saying all this, I accept thoughts and of the emails and the way I responded, even though it was an organised attack. I should have responded differently. That's 100%. I should have responded differently. And the investigation should have only been dealing with the emails, as the rest was dealt with by this conduct panel already. I have learnt from this, obviously, and it has cost me dearly. My position on cabinet, gone. My future with reform, gone. And my allowance, gone. Whatever you choose to do with me cannot be worse than I have already received. but I thank you.
Question from Thomas?
I log the fact that you've apologised 3 times. What have you apologised for?
For the way I responded to the emails. That was sent individually to each person of the 4. As I say, 1 accepted it and 3 didn't. But I apologise for the way I emailed, not particularly the content.
So, so the this statement you've made about the outcome of the investigation and probability and all this, and I disagree with your definition on probability, but we won't get into that. So do you accept the outcome of the investigation?
Yes. I do think it was weighted because it didn't speak to my witnesses, etc. But I accept it, yes, because I responded incorrectly in the emails.
It's actually a question for Mrs. McMillan. When the information was sent to the investigators, should it have been sent in total, or should it have just been sent of the 4 email complaints?
It should have been sent as whatever the panel decides to send forward for investigation.
Mr. Wood, can you help me here with the witnesses? There were 3 witnesses. Is it 3 witnesses?
Yes, sorry, yes.
It's 3 witnesses.
3 witnesses. 2 were to respond to how I'd been attacked in Markfield, as they had also been attacked. So by the same people in the same group. So that was why I was going to bring them. They could clarify that it was a planned attack on me. As I say, the 3rd one was, I'll use this online name, Mark Ford. He was prepared to come today, but he was advised not to. So, but yes, sorry, there was 3 witnesses.
And so you provide all of their details, contact details to
emails,
to us?
address and phone number to the investigation.
Okay.
But they was never called, never contacted, not even phone call.
Thanks, Chair. Mr. Whitford, thanks very much for coming along today. I've got a couple of questions for you. So, first of all, a lot of talk's been mentioned in the report, the investigator, and the report talks about your role being the lead member of the highways. And so, what I'm trying to understand, we heard earlier that there are no guidelines for cabinet members. How can I ask, had you received any training about how to deal with provocative emails from members of the public? Did you seek any advice from the cabinet colleagues or anyone else in how to respond to these particular emails? I mean, I'm just trying to understand what your thought process was, because certainly one or more of the emails you received they certainly have political content. So what was your thinking? You sat there, you've got the emails. What were you thinking? Well, I'll just forward that on to member services, or I'll ask the officers to reply, or no, I'm going to reply because I know who these people are. I'm the local member. What, can you just walk me through this, please?
My first action, I didn't reply immediately to the email. It was actually, most of them were received. And then I looked at them. I actually received 650 emails regarding the flags, just the flags. So I had spent a lot of time going through, picking out the best I could to reply to. I also had a meeting with the department and to get the official reply for the flags, which was that the council was not going to take them down. they would be left there until they became a problem, tatty, blocking signs, etc. Then they would be removed. That you'll find if you look back at all my emails that I actually put that in there, that it is illegal to put flags up on lampposts, and that I don't encourage it. And I was not involved in it, as one or two people actually asked the question, was I out there putting up the flags? No, I was not. It's illegal. And then I did reply incorrectly, but the information that's in there, I did tell each one that it is illegal to put the flags up. It's also illegal to go out with a ladder and take them down. It should be done with a cherry picker, and because the lamppost might not be safe to have ladders leant against it and whatever weight of person up the ladder. So
if I can just ask, Mr. Whitburn, out of the 650 emails that you said you received, how many of those did you personally respond to? Did you respond? Yeah,
about 300.
So there wasn't a policy in the department of got a big issue, and you've had a massive flood of emails come in, which, to be honest, that's quite overwhelming.
It was.
And I'm sure. Is there a policy in the cabinet or in the council that you know of, in the training you've received, that when you get a big response, we pass it over to corporate communications to deal with, or is it you're told that this is all on you to do? I'm just trying to understand.
Yeah, I mean,
what was actually going on.
I was told once I complained about how many emails I'd received, and I couldn't answer them all, and so I picked out the ones I thought were the most important.
So you chose these ones to respond.
I chose these ones, yeah. One, Markfield's my area, so I thought that was important. I didn't know anything about this group at that time, and then when I complained, I was told, well, you should just pass them all through, and we'll deal with them.
To where? To where?
Customer service, I guess.
Okay. Just a member service.
Yes,
Yeah. Okay.
yes. And of which I did. The other 300 went through because I literally didn't have time to respond to them.
Okay. In terms, so that's your thought process. Okay. And can I just ask, had you attended any other training for cabinet members, or had you had any internal training on how to behave as cabinet member, or attended any external LGA? Oh, sorry, we weren't in the LGA at that point, I don't think. So you couldn't have done that. But was
I did do some training, but of course, I think all of us did. Yeah. We came in. Suddenly, there's 25
specific training on how to be a cabinet member.
No. In fact, the meeting was held 2 days after election, and I was in cabinet.
Okay.
And it was early, as I say, and I do respond very differently now.
Thank you.
Councillor, so how long after you were elected did all this happen? In terms of your workload, what was that like at the time?
It was all new, and I got 3 departments to suddenly I was lead member for 3 departments in May, obviously early May, and these responses of the flags going up and all that was September basically. So I'd had 2 or 3 months to kind of get up to speed, and it was quite a heavy load to start with, but I actually really enjoyed being in cabinet and being in charge of those 3 departments, which it was so relevant because my whole life has been around roads, transport, not waste, but I learned that very quickly, and I really, really enjoyed it. So it was quite a thing when I was stepped down, is the official wording, by Dan. Is his own choice, and we all know he has the right to remove people from cabinet. To temporarily stand me down for 6 weeks, and we're still 8 months later just coming to a conclusion, but actually that's got nothing to do with this panel, I know that, but it also affected me in a big way.
So this is a question about the group itself. When did you first become aware of the group, or the individuals, maybe even? Had you had any contact?
Yes.
you had prior to that?
Not, I didn't know about the group,
Okay.
but I had contact with, gotta be careful here. I had contact with 2 of the complainants
Mhm.
at parish council level,
Right.
of where I'd responded to something relevant about planning of houses in Markfield. And they really went for me about the flags. It was the beginning of the flags. And they went for me in the parish council meeting, which I didn't know them. I'll be honest, I didn't know these people. I really didn't know them until the emails came in and then the complaints.
Can I ask, did that then affect the way in which you thought about your response? Because when you've already had some engagement with people you clash with, maybe, I'm just saying this, maybe you are a little bit more lenient with yourself in terms of how you respond, because you know the.
I should not have responded in that way. End of
Okay,
chat.
I'm just asking.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
I'm interested in the aspect of exposing the names of people who were complaining, media, etc., and your thinking behind that. And I guess it's just to the added again today that you've said today that if something happens, I'm going to expose this. What's that all about?
It got very confusing for a short period of time when there was all these emails coming in, and the group from Markfield was all on the same day and the same subject. So I'd also got a phone call from the BBC asking me to make a statement, and I said, "What sort of statement is it you'll be wanting?" And they were asking for information about the complainants. And when I went back, when I did the email to that person later on, that's what I was referring to. I had told the BBC I would not give any information about any of the complainants because I didn't think that was right. But when I responded on an email, I told them that I had been asked to reveal their names, and I would try my hardest not to. I didn't know at that point whether I'd be forced to give some names. I don't know. I don't mean by the BBC. I mean by something like a panel like this. Would I be made to give names? I didn't know. Inexperience, I'm afraid. But I would never have revealed him. No.
And what about today? Because you were threatening today to do exactly the same.
No, I believe that the report should have gone out unredacted to make it fair on my witnesses, which have now been redacted, which is fine. But I believe that this should have gone out publicly, the whole thing. I understand, as we've talked in this room, that to release the names of people would make them vulnerable. And so I accept that. But I would have been happier with it being completely in the public.
You see how that can be taken as a threat?
Yes. And that's why I won't say quite happily, but that's why I've changed my opinion during this, and I would not release. No way. I understand the importance.
King.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. Mr. Redford, we can just come back to talking about the emails that you received. So you said you had 650 emails, of which you said that about half of those you personally responded to. So when you said you sought some advice, was that before you responded to any of these emails, or was this after you responded to some of them, or could you just sort of just explain that a bit?
I think it was in the middle. I'd already started responding because they came in 1 or 2 to start with.
Yeah.
And I started responding. And when it started becoming evident that it was going to be a large process, then I did start asking questions of the department, what they think I should reply, etc.
Okay, and did they provide you with, a stock answer to use? No. So no, you didn't. Did you ask them for one?
No, I just asked them for the official response, from the council about the flags, whether they were going to take them down or leave them up.
If I can just come back to these emails then. So out the 650, you said you responded personally to about half of those emails, okay? And then but then these particular 4 emails that you responded to, were they part of this 650 batch, or were they kind of a separate kind of ones that you sort of, they came in, they were kind of part of it, but they were kind of also because they were in your division email? Is it around the same time?
I think they were actually some of the first ones that came in, and I think that's why I spent so much time responding to them.
Okay.
Because it was literally almost overnight in Markfield that all the flags went up. I don't know how many hours the people have been out there, but
No, we're not. Yeah, I understand what you're saying. So I'm just trying to understand, how you sought, guidance and advice on how to respond to this very large volume of correspondence, which it is a lot for anyone to respond to, and whether you got a standard reply response to use, or whether you, as you said earlier, were told or were advised just to pass them all through for response to be sent over. And
it was the early stages, was the early emails, I think, I was more involved in them.
Yeah.
And responded differently.
Okay.
And then it got to a pretty standard reply.
Yeah.
Copy and paste almost.
Yeah. Okay.
Of which there was never any complaints about them.
Okay.
So I think I'd already kind of moved away from that sort of response, which has caused the complaints. I think I'd naturally moved away from it. Yes.
All right, that's great. Thank you for that. Thank you. Thanks very much.
Any more?
I think earlier you said you accepted the report in full. So I've got written here that you accept that you didn't deal with the people with respect. There was an amount of bullying. You could have breached some of the equalities principles of the council, and you could potentially have brought the role and the council into disrepute. So I just really wanted to confirm that you accept all those in full.
I do. Completely.
Thank you, Chair. I've got a question for Mr. Orme, if I pronounced that correctly.
Of course, yeah.
Okay.
It's fine.
And just for a matter of information, Leicester did win on Saturday. Mr. Whitford is saying that you didn't approach any of his witnesses. What would your reply to that be?
So, Mr. Whitford, we gave him the opportunity to provide us with the names of anyone he'd like to speak to at the outset, and he didn't provide us with any potential witnesses. When we issued our draft report for comment, Mr. Whitford said that there were 2 people. It might have been shortly before that. Actually, there were 2 people who he would like us to speak to. So we asked him, given that he didn't appear to be disputing any of the evidence, what their evidence was in relation to. And he told us that their evidence was in relation to the aggressive tactics now being used by a group in Markfield who included some of the complainants. Now, we took the view that the complainants were not under investigation here. And so their evidence would have very limited value in terms of considering whether Mr. Whitford had breached the code. I would add that this is the first time that we have had any information from Mr. Whitford to suggest that he knew or had encountered any of the complainants prior to his responses. So whilst he talked about a group having been formed, it was very much put to us that this was in the aftermath of his responses. These weren't people he'd suggested that he'd met before. And so, again, the value to the panel to judge his conduct in relation to whether 2 other people would be able to tell us that these people were now behaving aggressively or in an unruly manner towards them in Markfield, we saw had very limited value to our investigation. The other person that he mentioned just now was obviously the person that shares the name with the name used on the fake what we believe was a fake Facebook account. Now, obviously, Mr. Whitford was suggesting that actually this person exists and that he set this account up. So we were obviously very keen to talk to this person so that we could establish this one way or the other, because at that time we hadn't decided to put that to one side and not progress with it further. And just to be clear on touching on that, sorry if I'm straying too far, but obviously the probabilities that he's referring to is the balance of probability test for weighing evidence, which is the test that we're required to use under the legislation, is something more than 50% likely to have happened. And so Mr. Whitford never suggested that he could put us in touch with a person called Mark Ford. He said he did not know this person and he couldn't provide us any contact details, and we could find no evidence of this person online. Mr. Whitford did say that he'd spoken to this individual's mother and this individual's aunt, but that they weren't willing to speak with us. So that was the extent of other witnesses that were available to us. And I hope you understand why and apologies if the panel would have liked to have heard more information. But we took the decision, everything comes at an expense. We have to be proportionate in our approach. And we decided that the evidential value was unlikely to assist your considerations, and particularly in light of what he's just told you about accepting all of the breaches that we'd highlighted.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Chair.
Is that it? Any more questions? Okay. Thank you, Mr. Whitford. We'll take that into account. Well, no more. There aren't any witnesses, so we can ignore that bit. So, Mrs. Roberts, would you like to give us your view as the independent person?
Thank you. Well, I've already set down my view on the register of interest aspect in which is in the report. I don't condone a breach of this, but I do think that it was reasonable for Councillor Whitford to rely on the letter from Companies House, which said that the company would be
wound up
before May, and so it was reasonable to assume that you were no longer associated with it at the time of the election. So on that basis, I think there is no evidence that there was deliberate concealment of the directorship, and also the complaint came in October after the company had been wound up anyway. So I think that, you know, treating that as a technical breach is adequate in this respect. Moving on to the other aspects, and I think these are more serious, more interrelated, and I'm pleased that Councillor Whitford has acknowledged that he agrees with the findings of the report, because I think the report was done, the investigation was done quite thoroughly, and the recommendations are quite clearly set out. What I found a little bit perturbing was on the aspects of treating people, not treating people with respect. The responses to the complainants seem to ignore their concerns about safety and intimidation in their own homes, and just went straight into questioning their anti-Britishness, their political beliefs. And I think that was demeaning and could also be very intimidating for them. I mean, from my point of view as a member of the public, I would have been very concerned to get a response back like that. And I'm glad that you accept that that's really not the way to proceed. The aspect of bringing the council into disrepute, I think what is sometimes not appreciated is that it's not just the behaviour of a councillor that needs to be looked at, it's the way that people perceive that. And I think particularly when it comes from a cabinet member who's responsible for highways, it could be read into your response that you like the flags. You're the member in charge of, or you're responsible for highways, the senior member in the council. The council's not going to take any action. And the perception might be, well, they're not going to do that because you like the flags, you want to see them remain. I'm not saying that's correct, but I'm just saying that that's my view of how it could be looked at. And I think that comes back to being very careful about how you respond to complaints. And then in terms of stoking divisions and undermining the commitment to promoting equality, I think I agree with the findings of in the report in that respect. And the other aspect I would like to raise is that the responses that were sent out, I think, could have a chilling and a long-lasting effect on the public's engagement with councillors in the future, particularly if they think that they are going to write in with a complaint about an aspect that you're responsible for. They get a very dismissive and sometimes aggressive response back. It may well put them off from coming and engaging with their councillors in the future. And I think that that's quite an important aspect in this case. But whatever findings you decide to make, obviously the sanctions available are quite limited. And in terms of demonstrating effective governance in relation to the findings and how you deal with these, I think it is also relevant to look at what other matters can be put in place to support Councillor Whitford in his role as a ward councillor going forward over the next 3 years.
Thank you. So before we adjourn to deliberate, have any panel members got any final questions they wish to add? To ask?
Yeah, I would like to ask both the independent person and Mr. Oram if they have any recommendations that they think that we should, or what actions would be appropriate for us to take.
I think that comes in the next part of the hearing. So once you've made a decision as to whether you believe the code has been breached, am I correct? Then do we come back and discuss sanctions?
You can do it a two-part way, or you can give an indication now and they can consider that at the same time to save the sort of popping in and out.
Okay, sorry. Yeah, so I just don't want to second guess your decision, obviously, and it will be dependent on whether you agree that he's failed to comply with the code or not. But if you do, then it sounds an apology has already been given, and I'm never a big fan of a suggestion of an apology anyway. I think they're either freely given or they're not worth the paper that they're written on. I've also seen panels left in a difficult position where members then fail to deliver an apology and they have to consider all over again what they do. But in terms of the sanctions available to you, hopefully there'll be a list available in terms of what's there, and they would include, and I would support your decision being taken to full council, and full council noting the final decision that you've made. In terms of any, I understand that that Mr. Whitford isn't the cabinet member any longer. I think you can make a recommendation if you consider it appropriate as to whether there should be a period where he's not allowed to be on a cabinet member or on any committees. Whether you think that's necessary. He says he has had some training, which you might want to get more information about before deciding whether that any additional training might be appropriate. But they're the sort of areas that I would be looking at.
Would you like me to comment? Well, I think I've already said that additional training, I think, is one element that does need to be looked at. I think the aspect that Councillor Whitford was a relatively new councillor, and clearly you've already said here that you were straight into a cabinet role without any real training around that. And I know you're no longer in that role, but I think it helps to reinforce what is in the code to continue counselling as you go, to continue training as you go forward, and also specifically to look at areas that, where we might need to focus a bit more in depth, perhaps in some cases than others. in terms of other sanctions, I think you need to take into account that Councillor Whitford recognises that he hasn't, or he wouldn't act in that way again. He recognises the findings, and I think that should be looked at quite close or considered quite closely when you think about the sort of, if I can say, sort of higher level sanctions that are available to you.
I would absolutely support that as well. I mean, I think the key for the panel today is sending out a message that Leicestershire County Council doesn't support that sort of responses to members of the public because they don't want to discourage them from making contact. And I think it's really important and fantastic that Mr. Whitford's voice is carried alongside that with the recognition that he's made and put forward today.
Okay. Thank you. Any final comments on
No, nothing more.
Thank you. Well, we will adjourn for it's from a little blocks here. I think it's however long it takes. Yeah. Thank you very much for your time.
Just on this, if we might.
Just on the.
Pretty good.
Jolly good. I'm glad you asked that question.
Yes.
Oh, there's a live stream. Okay.
5, 4, 3, 2. Yes.
Okay, thank you everyone. We're back in the session. Thank everybody for their patience for waiting. Panel's made its decision, which I will now read in full. People have had a copy of this, or relevant people have. So this is regards the investigation in respect of alleged breach of members' conduct by Mr. Whitford. Having decided to conduct the hearing in public session, the panel unanimously agreed that, for the reasons set out in the investigator's report regarding 4 complaints received from members of the public about email responses they received from Mr. Whitford sent from his county council email account after they raised concerns about the hanging of the St George's flag on county council lampposts in Markfield, Mr. Whitford had breached the following paragraphs of the Code of Conduct. The ones with regard to treating members of the public with respect, not to bully or harass any person, to promote inequalities and not to discriminate unlawfully against any person, and not to bring the role of councillor or the council into disrepute. Having made the decision, the panel has decided unanimously to impose the following sanctions. 1. That Mr. Whitford be formally censured for the matters set out in the investigation report, which the panel regard as unacceptable behaviour by a councillor towards members of the public. 2. That the monitoring officer write a formal letter to Mr. Whitford setting out the decision of the panel, the sanctions it has imposed, and its disappointment in having to make the decision that the Code of Conduct has been breached. A copy of this letter will be published on the council's website and displayed on the council conduct webpage for a period of up to 6 months. 3. That Mr. Whitford issue a public apology to be read out by the chairman of full council at the meeting to be held on the 13th of May 2026, the wording of which has been agreed by the panel and reflects the apology already made by Mr. Whitford to the 4 complainants and set out in paragraph 434 of the investigation report. Such apology to be published on the council's member conduct website along the formal letter referred to in item 2. 4. The council consider the training and support of newly elected members to make sure they're adequately prepared and supported in their role, particularly those appointed to cabinet. The Cabinet found that whilst Mr. Whitford had technically breached paragraph 2.3 of the code by failing to register an interest in a company, in line with the investigator's report, we recommend that no further action be taken in this respect. That concludes the meeting for today. I thank everybody for the time and input. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
And thank you, Mr. Long.
Thank you.
Indeed. It's a